Kia hora te marino. Kia whakapapa panamo te moana. Hei hurahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai. Tātou I a tātou katoa, haumai e hui e taiki e. May peace be widespread, may the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for us all this day. Give love, receive love, let us show respect for each other, unified, connected and blessed.
Well, kia ora everyone, and welcome to this Discussing Tourism webinar. My name is Steve Hanrahan. I'm the Advocacy Manager for TIA
See you in a bit.
and facilitator for today's webinar. Our Discussing Tourism focus today is on activating domestic tourism. We'll hear from operators about how their tourism organisations have pivoted to domestic and what lessons they've learned and what changes they still intend to make. And you'll also hear about how RTOs are linking in with operators in the Tourism New Zealand campaign to activate domestic tourism. Our panellists today are Joe Allison, Chief Operating Officer with THL, Gavin Oliver, Managing Director from EcoZip Adventures, and David Perks, Chair of Regional Tourism New Zealand. Welcome to you all. Chris Roberts, the Chief Executive of TIA, will also join for the Q&A session. The format for the webinar is a brief 5-minute update overview from each of our 3 panellists. And following those, there will be the opportunity for the Q&A. So please note the Q&A button at the base of the screen and send your questions through. The webinar is scheduled for 30 minutes, but it may run over if there are more questions. So Joe, welcome, and over to you to kick us off today.
Thanks very much, Steve. So look, I thought I'd talk a little bit about our Get Moving New Zealand campaign, which was where we were really trying to target customers to get out on the road and experience New Zealand through camper vans. And clearly we've had such an extraordinary reaction from New Zealanders to that campaign. It was really beyond anything that we imagined, and we are truly humbled by what we've seen as a result of it. The intention behind the campaign was to bring New Zealanders to the regions in a way that felt safe for them, with the ability for them to cook, sleep, eat, use the bathroom in a non-contactable way if they wanted to through a motorhome, but still get them within the regions and experiencing all of the areas that New Zealand has to offer. We had plenty of camper vans sitting around as well, of course. Winter is not typically season for us, so we had plenty of camper vans that we could make available. And one of the very first decisions that we made was that we felt that we really needed to price to meet the domestic market expectation. And had always felt actually that activating the domestic market largely sat around the price point that we offered. And so we chose the price that we thought would meet that expectation, knowing that it was likely we wouldn't actually make any money out of that campaign. We felt also that if we got some demand, there was a really high potential that we would be able to save some jobs, not just our own crew from THL, but other tourism operators that we hoped all of our customers would be visiting as they went out and about in their camper vans. There were probably 3 or 4 lessons that we would reflect on now, having been into that campaign for 2 or 3 weeks. And I think actually also running the Waitomo business, we feel that those lessons really extend into the Waitomo experiences as well. Firstly, we really get up for the campaign, but frankly we're overwhelmed with the interest that we got as a result of it. And while we have thousands of customers out on the road and incredible stories and excitement about families getting away in a camper van for the very first time, we also couldn't manage all of the demand that we actually generated as a result. And contextually for us, at one point we had 2,000 clicks per second on our booking system, which in reflection was something that any system would have really struggled to keep up with. And so as a result, our systems couldn't cope with it. Our reflection would be we should have really thought differently about what could happen if this campaign really took off and how we would manage it in a different way. we really had to do that on the fly as we saw what demand was actually occurring. Price was absolutely the enabler, and we would still think really seriously about the domestic price and go with the price point that we went with for the campaign. It's really clear that if you get that price point right, then you can stimulate significant demand. We also changed our whole customer experience to try and talk to the domestic market as well. We simplified our processes. We stripped away the sorts of layers that build up over years and years and years of doing business or dealing with international customers, and rethought our experience very much for a domestic customer. What they would want to know about their camper, recognising that the demand was coming at us for 3 or 4 days only. We changed our pickup processes and times. We wanted to consider people who wanted to pick their camper van up in the evening and take it home and pack it up from home, something that you wouldn't normally see with a largely international market. And we also allowed our customers to take pets with them, which was something we hadn't done. We also really simplified our offer and tried to make it easy for the domestic customer. We changed our deposit rules, cancellation policies, liability reduction, as we thought about what would really engage the domestic market. And we got some momentum. We didn't worry too much about what that would mean for the long term. We'll worry about that when we get to it. But really, we just wanted to engage customers in our brands with really simple offers for them to consider. And then lastly, the last lesson that we have really took from that would be the excitement that we generated within our crew, feeling proud of what we were doing for domestic New Zealanders, while exhausted, delivering well beyond anything that we had expected. But it was a very, very positive thing for our crew after some really tough months. And many of them have said how proud they are to have been involved in it and be involved in regenerating tourism across New Zealand. So yeah, that would be our reflections, Steve.
Thanks, Jo. That was a great overview, and well done on the Get Moving New Zealand campaign. Get New Zealand Moving, well done. Gavin, so Gavin Oliver, Managing Director from EcoZip Adventures, welcome. You're on mute, Gavin.
Thanks, Steve. I'm still new to this technology, even after all these weeks of lockdown. I still can't drive Zoom. I think, look, we're a bit earlier in the piece than Jo, so I probably don't have quite as many reflections just yet. There certainly seem to be some similarities. The first couple of weeks of lockdown were shell shock, and I probably wasn't very productive for those first couple of weeks. But then we moved past that, and you start looking at where are we going next. So for us, phase one was a really thorough analysis of our traditional domestic business. And normally projects are completed in the face of intractable deadlines. So lockdown gave us a chance to actually step back and really have a good look. And we looked at who are our customers, and we looked at them in terms of their age and their party makeup and where they're from. And then we looked at why do they come. And we discovered, obviously we knew it was couples enjoying a broader Waiheke experience with lots of wine tours, but it was families and it was corporate groups. And it proved a really fascinating piece of research, which we wouldn't have had time to do otherwise. Then we started looking at how do we talk to those customers. And it's clear that the expectations or aspirations of domestic clients are very different to international customers. International customers are seeking experiential products, things that teach them something new. Domestic customers are already familiar with New Zealand, so some of their expectations are different, and they're looking to, I think, to have some of their expectations or their perceptions reinforced. What we've learned, though, is that they palpably enjoy being reminded that they live in one of the best countries in the world, and that now more than ever, it's a hugely aspirational destination. In practical terms, it means that with domestic customers, we can't use the same kinds of messaging and iconography that we're using with international. Many domestic customers wouldn't view a visit to Waiheke as a journey of discovery per se. So we're tapping into messages around, you know, blowing out post-lockdown cobwebs, reconnecting with old friends, visiting an island you may not have seen for a while. And I think if international customers want to be enlightened, then domestic customers are looking principally to be entertained. There's a really much discussed perception that New Zealand's expensive for Kiwis, which is no less a problem for Waiheke. And I think it's important to remember that international visitors are spending leisure dollars, where Kiwis are spending lifestyle dollars. This is money that could be used to buy a new TV or perhaps pay for a school trip or pay down the credit card. So as a consequence, their perception of value is very different. And we know that Kiwis will happily splurge on activities in Bali or Fiji or the Gold Coast, but they're often much more reticent about spending money when at home. So we realise that we need to convince them that our product is equally worth the investment. In 2012, our opening rate was $99, and it's fair to say that at that level and with the number of customers we had, the business would have kept swallowing shareholder loans ad infinitum. So in the intervening years, we've raised our prices and the number of customers we zipped to a point where we had a very successful and very profitable business, or at least until March. I think for us, it's imperative that we don't devalue our product. So a straight off the ticket discount wasn't something that we wanted to do. We've listened to our customers, and particularly our would-be customers, and we know that the cost of getting to Waiheke is perceived as a barrier to visitation. So we then realised that this could equally be used as a lever that we could use to our advantage. So we launched a free ferry ticket promotion that's been targeted at couples and family groups, and we've experienced an almost immediate pickup. And it's been wonderful to see money coming into the bank rather than going out. In fact, on weekends, we've had capacity issues, which is a fantastic problem to have right now. The next phase for us is to target the corporate market. So we're working on some campaigns around the theme of reconnecting your team. And we know that with so many businesses have had staff working from home for months, we're pushing that idea that it's an opportunity to reconnect, to rebuild. Corporate's always been about 15% of our business, so we know that it's a market to which they're very receptive. I've said regularly that networks have never been more important, and it hasn't changed. So one of the first things I did was we went into lockdown was I established a small group of Waiheke's larger operators, very informal, but the idea was about sharing ideas and concerns and opportunities. And it's now developing into product opportunities. We're about to launch a range of zipline and lunch and wine tasting packages that are going to be pitched to the corporate market because we're seeing good visitation on weekends, but obviously midweek everybody's at work, domestic market, we're not getting quite so many visitors. We've also taken advantage of a reinvigorated tourism forum on the island, and I've just rejoined the committee for that. And we had significant media coverage recently with a campaign called On the House, which is a community-driven initiative to reinvigorate tourism, and it sees rental and holiday homeowners giving up a weekend's rental to encourage visitors to come to the island. So the visitor pays for their accommodation, but they then get their accommodation costs back in Waiheke dollars, and this is money that can be spent with restaurants and vineyards and activity operators. And so it really is, as I say, it's a community-driven initiative, and at the moment we're estimating that it could put something like $200,000 back into the island's tourism ecosystem on a campaign weekend. So that's been a huge win for the island, but it's been a massive profile boost for the island too. The forum then in its own right is also launching a campaign under the theme of Waiheke, a world apart, not a world away. It's a 3-phase campaign that we're working on, and the short term taps into the fact that Kiwis can't get to Raro or Fiji or somewhere. It's a very aspirational campaign that we're running, and it's been funded by the membership. There's sponsorship from Fuller's and EcoZip's put some money in, and we've had a grant from the local board. So in answer, I don't want to overrun the time. So I think, in summary, what have we learned? Well, it's nothing like business as usual right now. For us, it's about getting to understand the domestic consumer, understanding how we align our product with their expectations. We know they enjoy and value our product. We just have to ensure we're targeting the things that motivate them to get their credit card out and book. And so really it's about listening, just keep listening to consumers.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Gavin. Great overview. David, welcome along. David Perks, Chair of Regional Tourism New Zealand, to tell us about how RTOs are linking in with operators and the Tourism New Zealand campaign to activate domestic tourism. David, over to you.
Kia ora, everybody. Good to have the opportunity to speak to so many familiar names from around the country. I just want to first explain the luxurious surrounds I'm in. I've just been speaking at a skull lunch at the Sofitel here in Wellington, and I needed a room, and Raymond Faulkner, the manager, said, "I'll give you a room," and I'm in a beautiful room. So thank you to Accor and the Sofitel team here in Wellington for that. Gavin, you've just raised some really fantastic points that I want to cover off too, and I'll put my bent on them. Kiwis are different to international visitors, and one of the things I think which Tourism New Zealand and our friends at MB also realised was that a lot of the expertise in terms of getting New Zealanders to travel around is housed in the regional tourism organisations. And we all know that for New Zealanders, you can put things off. You can always say, "I can do that another time." And right now we can't let them do that. And there's a risk, I think, which we all are feeling, is that everyone's got out of their bubble and everyone's excited to get back on the road, but then it might all just be a bit of a false dawn. We can't let that happen. And so what we're interested in as RTOs is, how do we get people moving around New Zealand, spending money on all kinds of businesses, including, of course, our tourism businesses, so that going through the winter, businesses survive for another summer. And right now it is about how do we move things quickly. I think you've also raised a good point, Gavin, and great to hear you targeting that corporate market, because there's a real risk. International visitors come every day of the week, and every day of the week is a holiday day. Domestic visitors, we all have to go to work, we all have to go to school, we have other commitments in our lives. So how are we going to make sure that not only the weekend away travel happens, but also we get business travel, we get business events going more quickly. We make the most of the long weekends, that people do different things in the school holidays than what they used to do. And obviously what Joe and THL have talked about is a fantastic demonstration of how you can get people to do something different. And we need to be really nimble, and as Gavin said, to listening to the audience at this time. I know that there'll be a lot of interest in the $20.2 million that has been provided to the regional tourism organisations. And probably the first thing I want to say is, I'm hearing a little bit of a story about, oh, it's to prop the RTOs up. Well, it's not to prop the RTOs up. If the money coming from government is dependent upon money still coming from local government. There's very clear rules in it about no substitution. So what it is for, in the first instance, and probably the majority of the dollars, is about the Tourism New Zealand nationwide campaign. Gives people the excitement, the interest, the desire to get out and about around New Zealand. The conversion level is going to need to be given by the RTOs, who can provide detail as to what you can do, how you can do, when you can do it, how you access it all the time. And of course, for different places in New Zealand, those questions and answers are different. And so this will enable each region of New Zealand to be able to really make the very most of the investment that Tourism New Zealand are making, and to link up with operators to make sure that that action that Tourism New Zealand is making actually flows through to dollars going through the tills of businesses right across the country. The second two parts to the work are about trying to create a more resilient tourism industry across New Zealand, so that businesses are more resilient to future shocks, whether it's another round of this or something completely different. Who knows? We seem to get a bit of everything, don't we? So there's that. And then the third part is around creating a destination plan for each part of the country, such that the things that are addressed in the New Zealand Aotearoa tourism strategy, which are about addressing seasonality and increasing dispersal, so that some of the challenges we had in tourism in the recent past can be addressed, and we can actually look to bring the benefits of tourism to more communities, more people who are in work right across the country. I know that's caused some concern about the risk of everybody in being in market together. Well, we can be sure that every other sector is going to be competing, and we need New Zealanders spending their money on New Zealand tourism businesses, not on a Japanese television or a German car. So it's really important that we are in market and that people are being given different propositions by different regions. And of course, the regions are different. And of course, each region has different natural markets. So here in Wellington, where I'm based, I know that Destination Wairarapa will be looking to Wellingtonians. They won't be looking to Aucklanders. Perhaps in Hamner, in Haranui, they'll be looking to people in Christchurch. So there's different markets in there as well. And of course, that's really driven by the access to different places. So I'm confident that we will see an upswelling of tourism, the promotion of tourism to New Zealanders, but that it will just give New Zealanders more and more good reasons to go out every weekend and to get back to business travel as well. Thanks.
Right, thanks, David. We'll head into the Q&A part of the webinar now. So to attendees, please send your questions through to for Joe, Gavin, David, or you might have a question for Chris as well. We've got some questions here already, so we'll kick into those. But certainly do please send your questions through. Joe, we'll begin with you if we could. There's one here. How, why did you decide to price at the low rate of $29 per day? I'm not surprised you were overwhelmed. And did you consider a more modest rate, $59, $79, that might have driven the same result?
Sure. Well, perhaps the first point of clarification was that not everything was $29 a day. Obviously, the larger and more premium motorhomes were more expensive than that, and more up in the rates that the question person has put there. We had, as you can imagine, a lot of debate around the price, and ultimately we decided that we wanted to do something that would stimulate New Zealanders to travel, perhaps in a camper van, something that maybe they hadn't considered before. So a completely different proposition for them. We actually had a conversation a couple of days ago and said, in hindsight, would we do it differently? And we decided no. Actually, we felt that the price was right, and that it has made a huge difference in how people think about the sort of holiday that they can take.
Great, thanks, Joe. Gavin, there's a couple of questions here for you. You mentioned some research earlier on in your introduction. People just wondering if they could access that research, or you mentioned some market research. Gavin, you're on mute there.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, look, I'd be happy to share what we learned if people want to contact me directly. It's not an empirical body of research. What we did is we went back and looked at the quality surveys we do. We get about 21% of our customers complete a post-experience quality survey. So we went through and we read that feedback. We then looked at the demographic data we have for our customers. And then we just spent a lot of time discussing customer feedback and looking at what were the kind of things we were being asked, what were the recurring themes. So it's not like a body of research that I could hand over, but I'd willingly share what we learned with anyone that wants to listen.
Oh, thanks, Gavin. It's a great offer. Gavin, one here for you. How has your RTO helped in your pivoting to the domestic market?
I'm really over the word pivoting. Look, it's AT in a fairly invidious position at the moment, because you're probably aware funding has been frozen. The times are tough. There is a great deal of research going on in there, and people like Steve Armitage and Stefan Pinojo are beavering away, and they're just about to launch some initiatives. So far, there hasn't been much direct engagement with those guys yet, but there's stuff coming. And obviously, when that happens, we'll be working with them. But it's look, we're in almost, you know, if not daily, but certainly weekly conversation with them.
Joe, one here for you. Your promotion obviously stimulated a lot of demand, and you mentioned you're not able to meet that demand. How have you dealt with people frustrated that they cannot hire a van at the promotional price? And then there's also a question there, are you afraid that your discounting price may set a precedent for the future?
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, the customers that we that we frustrated and couldn't get through, we've genuinely been trying to communicate with them and work out some sort of an outcome for them, whether that's a time of the month that they wouldn't have normally chosen, where we might have a little bit more availability, or some way that we can help them to experience a camper van holiday over Christmas or at some other time. Most people, in fact, most of the folk that we've spoken with have been really understanding, and we're able to find something that we can do for them. A really small percentage haven't at all, and I think that's probably just the reality of the situation. We feel we've been really clear that this is a deal for a limited period of time, and so therefore I don't feel like it sets a precedent for the future. We've had some customers that missed out on the pricing for that deal period, and are now talking to us about renting over Christmas or in February next year or Easter next year as well. So yeah, I think we're just trying to do the right thing by those customers and be really clear that it was a one-off deal.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Joe. There was a question there for possibly each of the panelists around, will you consider a local price? So perhaps a permanent local price, sorry. Gavin, I'll start with you.
Yeah, Steve, no, I don't think it's something that we would, because then there's it's that definition of what's a local, and particularly on the island, we get a lot of challenges with that, where people will phone and say, hey, look, I'm an islander, can I have a deal? And are they truly an islander? Are they a batch owner? And why, in a way, should consumer A get a better price than consumer B? Ultimately, we've got operating costs that we have to meet, and we'd like to, you know, return to a level playing field, you know, in due time. So and I don't think it's something that's, you know, financially sustainable long term to do that. And I think it probably brings more problems than it solves.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. Joe, I don't know if you have any particular views on that question.
Yeah, we do have a domestic price, and it tends to be relative in comparison to an international price. So, yeah, definitely something that we do.
Okay, right. David, any views on domestic pricing?
Yeah, I think my view would largely be that the market should lead the price, and if there is sufficient demand, then the prices can move up, and I don't think there should be a special price for particular groups of people.
Yeah. Question here, again for each of the panelists, I may like to answer. With the prospect of an Australian bubble opening up, how will that impact your pricing choices, if at all? Joe, can I start off with you on that one?
Yeah, sure. And I'd probably pick up David's comment there that, you know, the market largely determines the price. And so Australians are used to travelling in New Zealand, and they're used to travelling in New Zealand in camper vans. So therefore, you know, the market itself will determine what the price is and what Australians are prepared to spend on a holiday in New Zealand.
Right. I don't know if anyone else had a view on that one there. All right, probably just time for one more question. The question here, Gavin, just around marketing messages. I noticed you had to change a lot of your marketing messages for a small business. Is that an expensive process? How do you go through a process like that? And Joe, you might like to have some views on that as well.
In fact, I probably should. It's probably easier for me than it is Joe, because Joe's got a much larger organisation. One of the benefits of being a small organisation is you can tend to pivot on a sixpence, and I use that word. And you can attempt to do different things. You can try things, and if it doesn't work, you can change direction again. And I think one of the big things that I've learned, and it hasn't just been this crisis. Generally, it's been about the power of digital. And digital allows you to dip your toe in the market in different ways, and you can try things, and you can literally try things for a few days to see if it works. And as we've moved away more and more now from traditional marketing methods, and most of our budget is going into digital, that does allow us to be almost experimental with that. So we can try things and move quite quickly. But Joe, I mean, they have a very, very effective marketing operation, and she probably is just as swift to change as we are.
Yeah, actually, it's sort of nothing like a crisis in some ways, because it pivots the entire team to the job that needs to be done. And we were reflecting on the fact that even the kind of like the campaign concept name of, Get Moving New Zealand was something that might have taken us a week to come up with in pre-COVID, and in fact ended up being 3 people in a room brainstorming for an hour and a half, and there it was. So it sped things up naturally, and we're all sort of trying to figure out how we can keep operating in that sort of rhythm as we move forward.
I think good points for you've both made there, and I think that part of the trick of this is recognizing the things that motivate New Zealanders to travel, and one of those, and I think particularly during this year, is now going to be being with friends and family. And how can you tie your product to that re-engagement, whether it's with your granny, your mates, a girls group, a wider family, whānau, those things, but also that need to get New Zealanders to do it now. So can you make it a special event weekend? Can you do something to that offer that is going to make people come this weekend rather than think, oh, it's just something I can do in the future?
Great. All right. Well, that's draws us to the end, to closing the webinar. That's the end of our questions. So firstly, thank you to our panelists for answering and sharing of all the information. Much appreciated. Thank you also to all our members for participating today. A couple of closing comments. The webinar will be available on the TIA website by the end of tomorrow. Also a reminder to our members to visit our COVID-19 pages on the TIA website. There's lots of current information, advice and support there for operators. And if you have any particular queries, as always, please get in touch with us either via info@tia.org.nz or call us also to discuss. Our phone numbers are on the website contact page. And lastly, our webinar next week is on next Thursday, the 18th of June at 2 p.m. And that's Understanding and Preparing for Increasing Cyber Threats from COVID-19. That's presented by TIA Strategic Partner Marsh. And you can register on the TIA website for that now. So Chris, over to you for closing karakia.
Thanks, Steve, and my thanks also to our panelists and some. As we've had this series of webinars, I think there's a steady building of optimism and more positives to talk about, which is a fantastic thing. And of course, we've got a very positive New Zealand public at the moment that we need to to be grateful for and take advantage of. That they do want to help. They do want to help our industry. They do want to have a fantastic visitor experience at home. So let's deliver that for them. Kua mutua mātou mahi mō tēnei wā, Nakitia mai mato katoa, o mato hoa, o mato whanau, ao ki te aorangi. Our work is finished for the moment. Bless us all, our colleagues, our families. Peace to the universe. Have a good afternoon, everyone.